Today's video is going to be about spring scarification. Hello and welcome back to our YouTube channel. Please do like, subscribe and comment. Today's video is going to be about spring scarification. Now we're sitting here in the 1st of February. We've got beautiful sunshine all around us, certainly down here in the south of England. And many of us eager on the lawns will be thinking about whether we can get our scarifiers out, whether we can do any sort of lawn mowing and feeding. So it's a critical time. The environment's changing. So is February the 1st the new March the 1st? So when it comes to spring lawn care, what do we tend to think of? One of the first things that we tend to worry about is whether we can actually mow the grass. And as you can see on this lawn here particularly, this isn't a manicured lawn, by the way. This is just a general lawn. It's been laid a number of years ago. Don't know if you can see this, but we've actually got ground source heat pumps in here. So we've got two huge great mounds with two depressions at the end as well. So it's very difficult to maintain this lawn incredibly, smartly, I suppose, purely because the levels in this lawn change by about 12 inches over the course of a year. But this is like a normal lawn. You know, this has been turfed a number of years ago with dwarf rye and fescue. It's completely changed in its characteristics from when it was laid as a turfed lawn. And it's also maintained in a way that suits the customer as well. So we've got quite a bit of patchiness, I would call this, in this lawn. As I say, it's not manicured, but whether you manicure it or not, it's still going to need the same principles for spring as anything else, especially if you want it looking a little bit better than it does right now. So what you can see over the winter, we've had quite a bit of sort of dead grass appearing, rotting down. We've got clumps of ryegrass here, which are going to end up in the compost bin, but they're growing 3 times the speed of everything else. But we've got lots of yellowing, lots of little bits of disease in there. As I say, a little bit of leaf damage. We've certainly got some access damage in here as well. But essentially, when we think about spring, what we need to think about is how we're going to make this look a little bit better for the rest of the year. And that's exactly the same whether you're having a manicured lawn or whether you just want something that's environmentally sort of doing what it needs to do. So first things first, when it comes to lawn mowing, I have a saying where if it doesn't stop growing, then don't stop mowing. And that really goes throughout the year. People often put their lawn mowers away in about October time and think, well, if I scalp it a little bit shorter, I might not have to mow it. But really, best keep it at the same sort of height that you're cutting over the winter, but top it off when it needs it. This could have had a top off by all means. This is a robot mowered lawn, sorry, and the robot did go in for Christmas and the New Year. But essentially, this could have been cut and topped off with a rotary mower. As I say, there's no harm in it at all. In fact, it's a good thing to do actually, because what it does is just help dry the plant out a little bit. You've got a little bit less leaf on there, so the plant sort of stays a little bit dry, hopefully, during that winter time. So anyway, this is a ryegrass fescue lawn. You can see these little clumps of rye looking quite ugly this time of year. Ryegrass lawns, you tend to have to sort of reseed into them a little bit. But here we've let nature do its own bit because of the way this lawn's maintained. So we've got an enormous amount of fescue in here and a lot of vertical ryegrass growth as well. Now, when it comes to scarifying, you've got to understand what scarifying is actually for. Do we need to scarify this lawn like we would, for example, a native lawn? What you have to remember with ryegrass, because this plant grows individually, it never turn into 2 plants. And scarification was designed to prune our native grasses. So in terms of scarification on here, we're not going to actually thicken up the ryegrass, but luckily we've got a native grass in here called fescue, which as we clean that out with a scarifier, it's going to allow new fresh growth. So it does have a benefit, but don't expect the ryegrass to get any denser than it is. So let's just quickly go and have a look at a native lawn and see what the differences might be there. So when we started this lawn back in 2020, it's almost locked down. This lawn was actually covered in about 90% weed. It had moss pretty much everywhere, and the grass was the most undominant plant we had. So when we took on the idea of this lawn, what we decided to do was reverse that. So the moss was an issue, but we knew that spring scarification was going to regenerate our plant growth. So the first thing that we had to do was think about, how do we get rid of the moss? How do we certainly make it struggle a little bit? We had the benefit that we knew the grass, the natural grass that we've got, was going to fill back in really, really quickly. The weed we weren't concerned about at all. We were looking at a more sustainable sort of idea on this lawn. So we thought, well, the first point of weed control is healthy, thick grass. So let's see where we are once we've got the grass, the most dominant plant, and also got rid of the moss, and see whether we actually even need to think about herbicides. And I'm a great advocate that herbicides aren't great for the environment, and you know, you can still have a beautiful looking lawn even with the odd weed or two in it. So so the first thing we did was went out and mow the lawn. When you do scarify, a lot of people tend to not mow the lawn, but essentially all you do is remove a lot of leaf blade unnecessarily. You can sometimes put the Scarifier machine under a little bit of stress as well, because it's long and wet. So the first thing you always do before you scarify lawn is chop it down, and chop it down a little bit shorter than you would normally do it. This is probably the only time I'd say mow your lawn a little bit shorter than normal. It's purely because it's going to be in recovery anyway. So first thing we're going to do is get our lovely battery powered mower out. So here we come down to what I'd call a native lawn. This is full of bents and fescues. As you can see, it's a little bit healthier than that other lawn as well. Not necessarily always down to the grass, but in this case it's down to the fact that the soil in here is far, far better than the ryegrass lawn. So we've got a much nicer consistency in here. But what we've also got is a grass that when we do start to scarify it, it actually prunes the grasses and makes them even thicker. It regenerates the growth and makes sort of another parent plant, if you like. So this will get thicker as I scarify it. The ryegrass type lawn doesn't necessarily get thicker unless it's got other species in it. So when it comes to scarifying, we always work out, you know, whether you need to scarify in the first place. In terms of this lawn, as you can see, we've got dead patches in here of decaying grass and shoots and stolons. So we've got to clean it out, because one of the purposes of scarification is thatch control. Now, perfect thatch control comes from the way that the soil actually interacts with the thatch. So if you've got incredibly good soils, your thatch will digest naturally. That's probably what I would call the perfect lawn, and that's something that we all should need to try and strive for. It's not perfect on the top, but it's perfect underneath, and it will do a lot of our work for us. So when I said about February the 1st, it's an interesting point, because this lawn here, for example, was scarified last February the 1st as a bit of a trial, just to see what would happen. Previously, most people wouldn't go out and scarify their lawn over the winter time at all, but February the 1st was a bit of an unknown. So we scarified it, and luckily the temperatures stayed as warm as they are right now, for example. And because this grass is much denser anyway, the plant actually filled in incredibly quickly, and we were back to a beautiful lawn by sort of mid-March time. So before we start mowing, just reiterate a couple of things. First of all, we need to understand why we're going to scarify. If you've got a traditional lawn, a bent fescue full of native species, you've got to think, well, what am I doing scarification for? Am I doing it just because everyone else does it? Essentially, you've got to have a reason. So when we have a traditional lawn like this, we're scarifying to control, thatch and redevelop the plant. That's the beauty of why it's a native plant. It's learned to adapt and it does all the things that we want. So when we do scarify this, it will get thicker much quicker than a ryegrass lawn, for example. Also, we're in the early part of February, so you're going to have to scarify for seeding, for example. If you are, you've got to be a little bit concerned about whether the seed's going to germinate. Now, of course, there are some grass species that will germinate very cold temperatures, but again, it certainly won't be one of the native species that you might want to promote in your lawn. So again, think about what you're doing it for. Is it going to be thatch control? Is it going to be overseeding requirement and necessity? Or is it something you're just doing for the sake of it? When it comes to scarifying, you've got to start thinking about not just what you do and why you're doing it, but also the tool that you're going to use. Now, this isn't a springbok rake, but a lot of people use a springbok rake for scarifying a lawn. What you've got to understand with native grasses such as bents and fescues, scratching out with a springbok rake, which was designed for leaves essentially, isn't going to prune your plant. You physically can't go fast enough. So although you might remove debris, you might remove moss, it's not going to prune the plant. And that's the one key thing that you must do when you've got a traditional lawn with native grasses. The idea is to slice through those shoots and stolons, which makes plants redevelop from within itself. A springbok rake isn't the tool for you. This is obviously just another leaf rake. But again, although I could remove moss with it, it's not going to prune the plant. The essential part of scarification on a traditional lawn is that although we're controlling thatch, we're removing some grass and dead shoots and organic matter, is that it's a pruning device. It's a way that the grasses are going to turn from 10 plants into 20 plants, 20 plants into 40 plants. That's how it redevelops. So picking the right bit of kit is really essential. Now, I throw that away because I hate rakes because they're used for scarifying too much. Now what we've got here, this sort of this ticks a lot of boxes on my side. Now we've got a little Einhell Scarifier here, a little domestic mower, Scarifier, sorry, battery powered. We'll talk about that on another video. But there's two little batteries, two little 18-volt batteries in there, which are going to save me using any fossil fuel, which to me is great. Now, if I just tip this machine up a little bit, you'll see under here that we've got nice thin little blades. And what they do when they spin at high revs, what that's going to do is slice through these shoots and the stolons that are in our lawn and recreate new plant growth. And that's why bladed machines, there are lots of different types of blades you can get, but bladed machines essentially are going to give you the key thing that we need, and that is to redevelop the grasses that we've already got in here. They're already telling us that they like to grow. All we're going to do is control a bit of thatch, remove a bit of moss, and actually allow the plant to regenerate and flourish yet again. Now, as I said, the first thing we need to do is cut the grass, because when you scarify, there's very little point in taking off this sort of top growth, especially that we've had during the winter. The lawn's 2 to 3 inches long in places. That's just going to stress our scarifier out, so there's no need to not cut your lawn. But before we cut the lawn, as you can see, I've got a lovely willow tree up here. First thing we need to do is get all these twigs off. Even though the mower might actually collect them up, we're going to rake all that off before we get the mower on. So what we got here is another little battery powered lawnmower. So this is quite a sort of sustainable approach to lawn care. Battery powers on most things where we can get it. This has got an 80-volt battery, so nice and powerful. Wonderful little bit of kit from Mountfield. So when we start mowing, remove all your winter debris that you've left behind. Again, if you're a bit of a lawn obsessor, you may not have that, of course. but as you can tell, I'm not particularly a lawn obsessed stripe fanatic, but I do care about what it does. So set your lawnmower up. In this occasion, we want to set it reasonably low, certainly at least 1 notch, if not 2 notches lower. We're not concerned about whether it's going to be a brilliant lawn mow here. This has just got to be to remove the surplus growth from the top of the plant. The 1/3 rule, which is a little bit ambiguous at the best of times, is not essential at all. The main thing we want to do, if we've got a nice sharp blade, then cut it with a sharp blade, and maybe cut the lawn a couple of times to sort of nudge it down, but get it a little bit shorter than you would be comfortable to have. And the purpose of that is that we don't want to put any stress on our Scarifier machines when we don't need to. This can do that for us. Okay, so let's get mowing. So now we've been out, cut the lawn. I did it myself. I haven't got a slave over there waiting to cut it for me. I would have liked to have perhaps cut it a little bit shorter, but it's a little bit thick with a little bit of thatch and moss. So again, without doing too much damage to the grass, I've cut it as short as I can go. The object now, what you've got to remember is there's many different ways to Scarifier a lawn. You've got to think objectively as to what you're trying to achieve here. Now on this lawn, it's really a little bit of thatch control, it's a little bit of moss control, and it's quite a lot of plant pruning. That's the reason I want to do it on this particular lawn. So when it comes to setting the depth of your Scarifier, that's quite critical. So obviously lots of people Scarifier lawns, lots of people Scarifier them quite well, lots of Scarifier them quite badly. But essentially what we've got to try and do is understand what we're trying to do when we Scarify. So the easiest way to do it is set your machine up onto its highest setting. Always set it on its highest setting, because what we're trying to do is leave as much of the natural grass that we've got in there and just tickle the moss, the thatch, and the sort of dead matter. We want to try and comb it out as opposed to plough it out. Ploughing and going deep isn't necessary. Thatch is basically mostly on our surface. There is a thing called subsurface thatch, which we won't talk about today. We're just talking about how to Scarify a basic looking lawn. So first thing we're going to do is set it up on its highest setting. We've done that. So all we're going to do now is put a couple of different passes in. And the reason we do 2 passes is trying to take out the natural grain that sometimes happens. Now this lawn is mostly cut up and down this way, for example, because you know the stripes, if I want stripes to go up and down towards the house and from the road going past. So we want to cut through those. So you can get bent grass sort of training its way, because it creeps so well, it can train one direction or another if you're cutting that way too often. So we want to go diagonally across those in 2 passes, combing the material out. We're going to have a quick go at that and then see where we are. So there you go, we've done a little bit of scarification. Haven't used a drop of fuel, which is great for the environment as well. Now, the main thing about scarification, as you can see here, there's still dead material in there. There'll be still bits of moss in there, but how you Scarifier lawn is very much down to what you're trying to achieve. We're trying to cut through and slice through these little stolons you can see here that are going to regenerate a new plant. I can Scarify this probably until I'm blue in the teeth, but the object here on my own lawn is to remove thatch, control a bit of thatch, and really let the lawn breathe and thicken up again. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not after a bowling green, I'm not after trying to get any kind of sort of ball roll on here. I just want the grass to recover and do its thing, redevelop and look beautiful again. So there you go. To summarize, think about what you're scarifying for. Think about how much material you actually need to take out as opposed to how much you can take out. Have a look at your grass species. It's quite important. It's the only part of the garden where we don't know the name of the plant that we're actually working on. It'll be one of three grasses. It'll be two natives, either bents and fescues, or it'll be a dwarf ryegrass dominant turf. How you maintain them is very much down to you, but think about what your objective is in the first place. This is enough material out, given the time of year. This is an early lawn. This is February the 1st. It's possibly a little bit too early, but if there is a lawn that can recover better than any other lawn, it's a native bent fescue lawn. So the next video that we're going to do will be to concentrate on what we've left behind. And what we would have left behind is a lawn that needs to recover, and it will certainly need some sort of form of moss control to take out what's been left behind. We don't actually want and need to remove all the moss that we've got in there. So there we are. Please do like and subscribe and comment again on the video. If you do want any sort of other tips, by all means go on to our website, or if you want to go in depth just a little bit further, take a look at the online learning course. Until next time, I'll see you then.